Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines might be one of the best RPGs ever, and one of the best Source Engine games ever. Yeah, I said it, including amongst Half-Life, which it competed with, sadly, directly. You can find out more about that amazing RPG, though, in my Troika Games Death of a Game, please. Featuring the World of Darkness setting from White Wolf Publishing back in 1991, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines wasn't just a cool RPG to play, it brought with it a ton of intrigue, complexity, innovation, and most importantly for this video, a desire for more games in the same universe. This would spur the creation of a couple more games in the universe, such as Bloodlines' sequel, stuck in development hell now for years, and Swan Song, an interactive narrative-driven game that flopped a bit, but we will talk about it probably at some other point. But in a surprising turn of events, with Paradox Interactive owning the license to the World of Darkness, and thus Vampire the Masquerade, they would put out a trend-chasing battle royale game dubbed Bloodhunt, that would allow players to play as vampires the series was famous for, and compete against each other to see who was the remaining player, or vampire. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodhunt, a vampire featuring battle royale, would launch originally into early access September of 2021 on PC and PlayStation platforms only. Within another year, it launched fully April 27, 2022. However, it dropped from 29,000 players to just about 500 as of a few minutes ago. Thus, Bloodhunt would fail to keep a player base and would be announced to be moved into maintenance mode just a year after it launched fully. With the game pretty much abandoned at this point, and the population not growing in the slightest, Bloodhunt has found itself being hunted on this series, the Death of a Game series, where we search for, or hunt for, the clues and bits of evidence that detail why a particular game or company fails. And so, why did Bloodhunt, a game featuring vampires known for their immortality, die so quickly? Choose your clan, I have my choice.
Oh man, and you're a goddamn Malkavian too, wow, you really are fucked.
Well, sort of, because they're not in the game, but let's get to the case. The story of this little offshoot side game, and our story, begins with Tencent, the Chinese publishing titan we seem to mention in almost every other episode, acquiring the Swedish developer Sharkmob. Sharkmob doesn't seem to have much of a history, and was working on unannounced projects at the time for roughly 2 years. They were a team made up of some veteran game developers, however. My guess is that Sharkmob sold themselves to Tencent after a pitch deal gone right, or a few of them even, since they were reportedly working on multiple projects, plural, with Tencent following the acquisition. Following a 4chan leak, details concerning one of these new projects would be leaked online. These leaks would detail development being done on a Vampire the Masquerade game, a battle royale even, dubbed Project Lonely Fish. Besides just screenshots and details, gameplay was leaked as well, and with the gift of hindsight, we know that this was legit. This leak felt to me like a developer behind the scenes not either having faith in the product or perhaps a targeted on-purpose leak, which could serve as the beginning of a hype cycle for an upcoming launch. Ripping the band-aid off, Sharkmob would fully announce their upcoming Vampire the Masquerade game, Bloodhunt, a month later. A battle royale set in the World of Darkness setting was, different, but not really something I could see a lot of connections or bylines through. What I mean is that this is a franchise historically known for PvE, player versus environment, and having a PvP game that isn't based on humans versus vampires and Vampire the Masquerade was kind of strange. You utilizing supernatural powers, weapons, and a desire for blood must try and hunt, fight, and survive the night. There were hints about some PvE content, but not many of the details were revealed. You must fight against other vampires, and this apparent entity, in quotations, which was supposed to be something hell-bent on like destroying or exterminating you. The platforms that were suggested were PC and next-gen consoles, but not really confirmed yet. Although another wrinkle with the announcement would be that Sharkmob would confirm that they were working on 2 additional projects alongside this one, which for me is not really something that you want to hear when they're making a live service game. Another interesting thing to note about Bloodhunt was that due to its timing, it was utilizing the Unreal Engine 4, and would be launching in that next kind of difficult time period where the next-gen games would be coming out as well, with the launch of UE5 in 2022. Bloodhunt would come to early access on PC and PlayStation 5 only September 2021, and this would be teased in a trailer showcasing some of the clans that were featured in the game. Clans, of course, are the vampire groups or guilds that are based on blood, shared interests, and powers. The issue being, even the journalists covering the announcement were confused about how this would translate into a battle royale. Dropping on Steam for free, Bloodhunt would hit an impressive 20,000 players peak. Impressions were positive of the initial testing, with monetization being seemingly extremely limited to only the skins and the extended battle pass on top of the free one that you were already given. For a spin-off game, Bloodhunt wasn't really trying to rake your pockets. And the gameplay was functional enough, though we will talk more about that in detail after the full launch. I put that in air quotations because, to me, an early access launch, especially for a developer backed by Tencent using a well-known IP, is not a place for them. This is not an indie developer, though they should be putting more time or effort into their development and waiting for a full launch. This early access, escape criticism crap and launch on finish with companies with funding is just absolutely silly. Although Bloodhunt was able to have an impressive player count originally, within a month it already dropped to just 5,000 players, a really bad sign. Part of this was due to them not having anything other than a single queue mode, which they would rectify in their Act 2 update with a duo mode being added. This update was rather small, especially considering it was the last major update they would have until April 27, 2022. And that date matters because that was the full launch on PS5 and PC for Bloodhunt, the Vampire the Masquerade Battle Royale. Bloodhunt featured a highly detailed rendition of Prague, or Praha, Old Town. Played at 4K graphics, players would have the ability to choose their clan and customize their character too. Not really bad for a free game. The gameplay consisted of you playing with said customized vampires and traversing through the map, or up it, as you could actually vertically scale buildings too, in an attempt to be the last vampire standing. Unique aspects being things like PvE questing, where you could actually have story quests take place during the match, and some of the structures with some of the NPCs, and have also the ability to harvest idle civilians for their blood, classic Vampire the Masquerade, which would grant you different benefits. Caloric would grant you more melee damage, a key difference of this game versus something like, for example, Call of Duty Warzone. Melancholic, which would reduce cooldowns of your clan power. Ligmatic, which would reduce your archetype power, which was kind of like your class. And Sanguine, which just granted more health. The clans would work kind of like this. Each clan has two different choices to choose from. The Bruja, for example, with the Brutes and the Vandals, would specialize in brawling and could either focus on defense or offense depending on your specialization. Despite all this talk of RPG-like mechanics though, the majority of your fighting and killing would be done with various guns in the typical Battle Royale fashion that you would find scattered around the map. Now, melee was a thing, but guns were kind of like the end-all be-all. Shooting a target until they're downed and executing them would grant you the maximum points, and just was the easiest. Last vampire standing wins, classic Battle Royale stuff. But Bloodhunt was also free, and would feature crossplay between platforms. Metacritic, an aggregate review website, would not only not have much Bloodhunt coverage at all, only having 8 critical reviews featured with a score of 77 out of 100. Worse, none of the outlets were any outlets of notoriety, meaning that the game in general had such little coverage and little marketing clearly. But that's not surprising, when major outlets like PC Gamer and Destructoid, when covering the game pre-launch, would state that the game felt baffling to fans and non-fans alike. PC Gamer had some positive thoughts, since the dev team had some experienced leads like Craig Hubbard of Gotham City Imposters, which we've also covered in the series, and Peter Mannerfeldt of The Division. The problem being that these aren't Battle Royales, and nothing like them really. That's not to say that they weren't the right ones for the job, but the job, a Battle Royale set in Vampire the Masquerade, the universe, was just a strange one. And the large question, and largest question really being asked, was why? Who was asking for this? Even if you had the funding and experienced devs to pull off an idea like this, why? It just didn't seem like a good idea. Instead, it just seemed like an idea that got pitched to investors, and then it succeeded, unfortunately. The best thing about the Vampire the Masquerade is the mystery and social intrigue. It's a dark world full of powerful vampires from different clans and cultures. While you could feel some of these aspects in Bloodhunt, the majority of the game was you just shooting people with guns, which was only a part of Vampire the Masquerade as a game, or universe, but the entirety of Bloodhunt now. Later on, they would introduce new gameplay that would allow, less gun focus, but why wasn't that just included to start with? It seemed like Bloodhunt was just a hodgepodge mix of ideas with no real direction besides just satisfying the minimum. Well, that's beside the quest system, the best feature, and arguably the crowning feature of Bloodhunt. Quests would feature voice work, multiple steps, and even have challenges that you would have to complete during the Battle Royale. I think this was a cool and fresh idea. The only problem being, generally speaking, Battle Royale players hate AI inclusions. Call of Duty and Fortnite, you name it, are really good examples. These games not only have bots, they also have NPC encounters that many players like myself ignore. That's not to say that that's always their future, but when they don't differ enough in difficulty or variety, you just get bored after doing it a few times. A series of updates would happen following the launch, including the introduction of a team deathmatch mode and some community changes. Now, for me, this is a bit of a red flag. Now, let me explain. Do I think that communities weighing in on changes are important? Yes. However, I think that when your game isn't even fully out yet, or competitive with others in the same genre or market, so it doesn't feel like it's fully out, relying on your community to impact your game's future directly so early on in such a strong way seems like a faulty proposition to me. These players naturally are going to advocate for their own favorite BR mechanics and preferences, while ignoring the fact that Bloodhunt was supposed to be a unique vampire shooter BR. I think good examples of this, to contrast in the wants and desires, is shown early on with how much Bloodhunt worked on trying to increase the pace, the gun power, and the action in the game. This makes sense in a regular BR game, but in VTM, the game, it doesn't really. I mean, in Bloodlines, you can literally avoid combat, either by talking your way out of it or stealthing. So early on, these contrasting ideals from the community and developers in a disconnected world and story help contribute to people getting bored of the game so quickly, which is shown in the population dropping to a mere 2,680 players peak. December is when you start to see the classic paltry live service style updates, problem being, I can't imagine Bloodhunt was making much money considering it had such low monetization in the first place. The Warden was introduced as a class/archetype though, and I really think that it's actually a good addition in the sense that it brought the game closer to what an actual Vampire the Masquerade game was, with the magic-wielding vampire. The problem is you can't really hit people from very far with your abilities as much as you can just shoot people, making it the end-all be-all way to kill. This actually is made worse by crossplay, as many players on PS5 would complain about having almost no chance against PC players, and reportedly this was due to the low or no aim assist on controllers, which makes it almost impossible to compete with the PC player in a movement and shooting based game, except if it's like a game like Halo. Now, people in the comments will probably argue, but Halo on console has aim assist. Yeah, but there's also so much CQC that even if you are a PC player, you don't really have that much of an advantage unless you're playing at far ranges. Bloodhunt, on the other hand, likely had a larger casual than competitive audience and would have this large skill disparity that would create problems. Although it seemed like Sharkmob was aware of this when they put out their combat and power update, it seemed to communicate, again, the problem that they thought that the pacing was the problem, which I completely disagree about. I mean, just watch the gameplay. It already plays faster than most other BRs. The issue is that the game is not all that unique in its approach, or at least it just doesn't fully commit to it. And the parts that it was unique with, the abilities, the clans, the blood-sucking, were being upgraded, but so were the gunfights. And technically, reducing the counts of civilians was also kind of like an ability nerf. The next update, the Tremere update, was honestly another iteration of an initial idea of the Warden, with a new class, the Scholar, who uses even more abilities. So thumbs up. But I feel so conflicted about this. I think the game needed this to break the dominance of guns, but the problem is it needed this like pre-launch and then have a lengthy beta to test it all out. Trying to do this all live and develop content at the same time seemed almost like really difficult, if not impossible. The peak population was already 2,200 players, so things were only going to get worse from there. Even if there were some fun parts in Bloodhunt, and honestly I kind of find it to be a quirky game in a good way, it didn't offer anything that unique, and what it offered uniquely, as I stated, it basically hedged its bets to not piss off the gun-centric BR players. But then, why make a BR? Bots would make a return to the trio mode by April of 2023, showcasing the increasingly diminishing population. When bots take over a BR, it's a slow, painful death from that point on, and we saw that with Spellbreak, where the AI isn't half bad, but it's not nearly as good enough as like the veteran players. The veteran players are like gods compared to the AI, so whenever you go up against them, it's a painful experience as a new player, especially when you've just been training on bots. Now, bots aren't inherently bad in ABR, especially in lower skilled lobbies, but when the most of the game is bots, you have a big problem. Although the numbers were quite low, so the news wasn't completely surprising, it was still a bit of a shock that on May 15, 2023, Sharkmob would announce the ending of their development on Bloodhunt and that they would be shifting it to maintenance mode and keeping the servers up. According to Sharkmob, ever since launch, we have been on a journey to excite and delight our players. However, while we have an amazing and very engaged community, we haven't been able to reach the critical mass needed to sustain development. While the game being shut down so soon, just a year after launching, is tragic, them deciding to keep the servers up period was at least a cool gesture. And I say cool gesture because it's probably only a matter of time before they actually decide to shut it down, at least historically. Though Bloodhunt was already free, so it being free with cancelled development likely wasn't going to increase a desire for players to play it at all, living as a shell of its former self since it's a multiplayer-focused battle royale. This made many fans complain about this in particular, especially with the story quests being included in the game. That being said, Vampire the Masquerade did come out with a narrative-focused game too, Swansong, and it completely flopped. So it's not just delivering what players want as an idea, but you have to actually execute it. Paradox, right? But Paradox now was in charge of the Vampire the Masquerade universe, and they seemed a lot more interested in focusing on social issues and virtue signaling in a different way than making compelling, deep, and controversial games. That's because Vampire the Masquerade isn't a sanitized world or game.
Selling remedies is honest work. I came to America after discharge from Chinese herbal remedies forces to help aging parents restore. Definitely, I am now American citizen. God bless the Allegiance flag!
It has incredibly dark themes, the darkest even.
Man, we got everything you'll ever need. Softcore, hardcore, gay, straight, farm, or furry. We got shockers, shivers, self-lubricators, and strap-ons.
I mean, it has demons, it has monsters, it has vampires, it has blood-sucking, it has murder, it has way worse themes than I'm mentioning. Now, perhaps Paradox just simply didn't have the stomach to handle the IP correctly, and Bloodhunt was just another example of that, at least in a sense. The final community update would drop May 30th, 2023. Remember, community updates are good in the sense that they are based on community feedback, but bad at the sense that they call attention to the fact that the devs weren't working on the game anymore. Remember, devs get paid professionally to solve game issues, and relying totally on community feedback is just lazy and unreliable past a point. And it really only has a place when the devs move on from the game because it's been successful, right? Throughout the entire time Bloodhunt was in development and then launched, Sharkmob was working on other games, as I mentioned. One of those games was announced December 11th, 2023, Exoborn, an extraction shooter. And the crowd goes wild, woo! If this was another kind of game, I would be sitting here positively trying to say that Sharkmob probably had some potential to make something good. But this is literally another copy-paste money-making gaming trend that even if it's offered uniquely, can they even pull it off? The reason that chasing trends sucks is threefold. The death of comparison, where you are constantly compared to a game that in many cases is bigger, better, and older than you. Second, if you don't have the same pockets as that competition, you basically have to outplay them or out-innovate them, which is extremely difficult. Finally, our last reason is regarding intention. If your intention is really to set the extraction world ablaze or BR world ablaze with a unique title, by all means do it or try. But when it feels like your intention as a game developer is just simply to make ends meet, it becomes a bit transparent to the gamers that play your games too, or are thinking of it. And there's no guarantee of quality there. If Bloodhunt was attempted at more than what it seemed to be, maybe it could have been more than just a quick off-brand game that you could have made a buck off. And maybe that would make me not have this lingering feeling, like that burnt taste after you eat like a really burnt marshmallow. With the population of Bloodhunt at a mere 532 peak players as of just a month ago, Bloodhunt, with its cancelled development and a tiny player base, is not climbing back up the ladder like you can climb up the buildings in the BR. It likely will face its actual death quite soon, and so, do you detectives know why? I'm sure many of you do, since you've probably been paying attention to the clues along the way as they pop up. But for those who didn't, or missed any of the clues, what are the largest contributing factors to Bloodhunt being shifted into maintenance mode? It was abandoned basically after a year. It had a lack of content, amateuristic design, inability to generate revenue. It flew against many of the series in IP standards and expectations. It got launched in between that UE4 and UE5 jump, which is just unlucky. The redheaded stepchild strikes again. Sorry, my redheaded fans with step-parents. This means that despite Bloodhunt boasting the Vampire the Masquerade name, besides the mention and inclusion of its clan lore, it feels more like a generic vampire game, or story, more akin to something like Underworld, where the vampires are far more generic. The beauty of Vampire the Masquerade is the vampires, but not just because they fight and suck blood, but because they all have unique clans with unique desires and approaches to problems. These clans are not allied with each other and thus create constant social intrigue and conflict because of this. There's the ugly and scary to look at Nosferatu, nowhere in sight in the game by the way, and the crazy talking seer-esque Malkavians.
Indeed, and I fear not his wrath nor his judgment.
And honestly so much more in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. These complexities are increased by the fact that the combat isn't the only way to progress in the World of Darkness IP itself. You had the World of Darkness as your oyster, and you decided to just make Imitation Crab. Let me know in the comments below what you love about Vampire the Masquerade but didn't like in Bloodhunt, or perhaps your favorite things about the Vampire BR if you did enjoy it. Thanks for watching.
Mayday, 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 mayday.